Oh, I love bacon and eggs for breakfast. And not only do they make a fantastic breakfast, they also provide us a picture of what it means to really be devoted. You know, it's been said that coming up with this breakfast involved both the pig and the chicken. And the chicken was merely involved. The pig was committed. You understand, don't you? I mean, the chicken, he contributed and lived to see another day. The pig was all in, committed to the breakfast so much that that's it. And when it comes to understanding Christians, have you ever noticed Christians, people who call themselves followers of Jesus, have vastly different devotion levels? There are some Christians who are like the chicken. I'm a Christian, and they contribute some of their life to this cause of God. But there are other Christians, how's that for bacon, huh? Like the pig, who are all in and devoted. Can we talk about this? I have to be transparent with you that for a while I was a chicken. As a young man, I just wasn't interested in full devotion to Christ. It seemed extreme. It seemed radical. I wanted my Christian life to be an enhancement of my life otherwise. I wanted Jesus in my life. I saw benefits I could get. In fact, I was more about getting than I was about giving. It was about my life being a little better with a little religion mixed in. And I wasn't interested in sacrificing my life for the sake of the cause of God. No. I was a comfortable Christian. I was comfortable with giving enough time, giving enough money, giving enough attention to things of God that I was still very comfortable with. Anything that demanded me into the realm of sacrifice, I'm like, no, thank you. I'm not going there. I think part of the reason I was living that way is I liked the Lord. I didn't love the Lord. You see, there are certain Christians who get to a place where they recognize that the cross of Christ is their life. Jesus died to give them forgiveness, reconciliation with God in heaven forever. And as a result, they will live and die for the one who gave his all for them. And they love him so much, they are eager to center, to define their very identity around Christ and to make every day an offering where they live for him. A lot of people start off their Christian journey as a chicken, but they need to make that pivotal shift to being a pig, fully committed to the Lord. Hey, let's get back to our series, shall we? For such a time as this. We've been looking at Esther, this Jewish girl who has risen up by the providence of God to become the queen of Persia. But we've also looked at her adoptive father, Mordecai. And today we're going to focus in on Mordecai and ask the question, where was Mordecai? Was he a pig? Or was he a chicken? What was the level of spiritual devotion to the Lord in his life? Well, interestingly, as we arrive at the text in chapter 3 that we're studying, we find a test to figure out what Mordecai is made of. Here is Esther 3, verse 1 and 2. King Xerxes honored Haman the Agagite. Friends, we're going to get to know this Haman, and he is evil. He is the arch enemy of the Jews, of Mordecai, of Esther. But he apparently was a real hero to this King Xerxes, because it says that he elevated him, Haman, to the seat higher than all of the other nobles. This is the number 2 position in the entire Persian Empire. This Haman is powerful. Continues, all the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this. This bowing down posed a real problem. Here is Mordecai working at the palace gate with all of his peers, and they all follow the order and bow down before this new leader named Haman. And to a Jew, this bowing before a leader would be viewed as worship, as glorifying this human in a way that is entirely unacceptable. What will Mordecai do? I'm sure Mordecai was reminded of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He felt a lot of kinship with them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their stories in the Old Testament, they would have been contemporaries of Mordecai's grandparents. Maybe his grandparents knew these guys, definitely told Mordecai their story. And Mordecai felt a lot of kinship. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he too was an employee of the government. He was a servant of the evil empire by employment. In addition to that, they were all exiled Jews. They had all been separated from the homeland of Israel and pulled away, living in a foreign land. And now they're both being asked to bow. Mordecai knew that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego heroically remained standing, refused to bow to the golden idol when everyone else bowed. Mordecai said, I can't believe it. I'm living the biblical story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What am I going to do? How devoted to God am I? If I don't bow, that could be ugly. If I do bow, it's offensive to my God. What will I do? In this moment, he was being tested. Mordecai, are you a chicken or are you a pig? Well, you may say, well, I bet he's a pig. I think Mordecai is really devoted. Hey, before you jump to that conclusion, you should know that earlier in Mordecai's life, he had been tested and revealed to be a chicken. Here's what I mean. One of the things that divided the Israelites back in that day was whether or not they would return to Israel. In Mordecai's day, the invitation to go back to God's land and help rebuild Jerusalem was available. It happened actually during the reign of Cyrus. Cyrus was the Persian king who had conquered the Babylonians. Let me just back up. Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, dragged the Israelites away into exile. The Israelites had a tough go during the Babylonian Empire. But Cyrus, the Persian, when he conquered the Babylonians, he invited the Israelites to go back home. Some of them did. Some of them stayed in what's now Persia. You may say, why would any of the Jews wanted to stay in this land of being a conquered person? Here's why. Moving back to Israel was dangerous. In fact, Ezra, who records his journey with the Israelites back, at the end of a 4-month journey, he gives a prayer to God in Ezra 8, and he says, Lord, thank you for keeping us safe from the enemies who hate us and the bandits who would harm us. So yes, going back, you were putting your life at risk. Secondly, second reason you wouldn't want to go back is it's a tough life. They were going back to a land where there were no houses. They had all been destroyed. They were leaving the prosperity of Persia with the nice homes and going to live in tents in the squalor of a broken down country? Why would I want to do that? And here's one more. Going back to Israel was going to be back-breaking work. They had to build up the wall and build up the palace. All of this painful labor that wasn't even for you. It was for the nation, ultimately for God. So why would someone leave a relative life of comfort to sacrifice everything? Why? Because they loved God that much. They were willing to die to their own comfort and preference for the sake of the Lord. Some of the Israelites showed themselves to be devoted. Other Israelites, like Mordecai, took a pass on that opportunity, and in doing so, showed that their devotion to the Lord was minimal. They made a contribution. They were involved, but not committed. Mordecai had multiple opportunities to go with various groups going back to Jerusalem. And he was part of the group that said, yeah, I'm not interested. So our friend Mordecai has demonstrated that, spiritually speaking, he was a chicken, half-hearted in his devotion to God. But our study is about to reveal some really good news for chickens like us and for people like Mordecai. Here's the good news. Our God has a specialty of turning chickens into pigs. So in the past, Mordecai had proven to be a man who lacked spiritual devotion to the Lord. It wasn't heroic, it was compromised. He gave an egg, and that was it. But is that still the case? You know, people do change. Let's figure out where Mordecai is as we pick up in this text. Now, I want you to imagine the context, all right? This great new leader, Haman, has arrived, probably in a royal chariot, all the pomp and circumstance. He's at the gate of the palace where Mordecai and many work. Suddenly, a trumpet announces the arrival of Haman, and this massive crowd that had moments earlier been bustling with conversation and noise is instantly hushed. Everybody knows of the law, and they don't want to get in trouble. And so, like a mighty wave in unison, this crowd bows in reverence, respect, and honor to the great Haman. Everybody bows, but one. There is one who stands resolute with his shoulders back and his jaw clenched, and he will not give in. This is Esther chapter 3, verse 2 and 4. Mordecai would not kneel down or pay Haman honor. Day after day, the royal officials spoke to Mordecai, but he refused to comply. Apparently, these royal officials had witnessed this a number of times. Maybe the first day they overlooked it and said, well, the guy just doesn't get it. He was confused. But the second day, they approach him and they say, dude, what's up? Tell you what, friend, you can count your lucky stars that we're not going to get down on you today. But you think about it, and tomorrow we're going to come this way, and we'll be watching for you. Didn't matter. Mordecai still, day after day, would not bow. Eventually, they asked him, it says in verse 3, the royal officials at the king's gate asked him, why? Why do you disobey the king's command? Verse 4, Mordecai told them that he was a Jew. This is big. This is actually what I would call like a double courage. This double boldness. Number one, he's not bowing. He's, refusing to spiritually compromise by honoring in a way that only the Lord should be honored, this human leader. But secondly, now he's admitting why. He's saying, listen, I'm a Jew. Before he had been an undercover follower of the Lord, not wanting it to be known of his spiritual identity. But that too has passed, and now he's boldly acknowledging his allegiance to the Lord by saying, I am a Jew, a people, one of the people of God. Wow. Mordecai, way to go. Why the change from half-hearted commitment to wholehearted commitment? We're left to speculate. I think I can guess why. Do you remember last week? What was it? It was chapter 2, verse 11. During the crisis where his precious adopted daughter Esther had been swept away into the palace with this horrific contest where the evil king was going to figure out which woman he wants most. You know, what did we learn of Mordecai? Every day he went to the temple courtyards and walked back and forth, asking if anybody knows how Esther is doing. As he paced back and forth in anguish regarding his daughter, you can bet he prayed. I'm imagining that season may have lasted years. It was a season of crying out to God, oh, dear Lord, protect my precious daughter. God, I need you. In this hour, I need you. It's amazing how hardship can drive us to prayer, and prayer, especially prolonged seasons of prayer, to deeper devotion to the Lord. The Lord had answered Mordecai's prayer. Suddenly, not only was Esther okay, but she had won the contest, and she had been promoted to queen in the land. And I assumed that Mordecai had realized, oh, the Lord has answered my prayer. He is caring for my daughter. And now in this moment where he's being asked, will you obey the Lord? Will you stand up for God? Mordecai's like, the Lord stood up for me. He's answered my prayer. I have been crying out to him. How can I be a hypocrite now and refuse to stand up for him? I'm speculating, but I'm guessing that long season of prolonged prayer and dependency has knit Mordecai's heart to the Lord in a way that had never been the case prior. And because of that, he's ready to stand up, acknowledge the Lord, and refuse to bow. How beautiful is that, huh? Well, let's take a look at how it goes, shall we? Here's verse 5. Haman was enraged. He finds out about this Mordecai, this rebel, refusing to give him the honor that the king says must be given. Haman was enraged. And having learned who Mordecai's people were, that's the Jews, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all the Jews. What? What is going on here? Why this sudden hatred of the Jewish people? Here's why. What do we know about this leader named Haman? Well, back in verse 1, we were introduced to him. Do you recall? It said that he was an Agagite. Haman the Agagite. An Agagite was a descendant of Agag. Agag was the king, the notorious king of the Amalekites, who was killed by who? The Jews. Samuel the prophet, to be specific. But these Agagite people, descendants of this king, they grew up with anti-Semitism running in their veins. They hated the Jews, the one who had killed their forefather. And so this Haman's already got a disdain for the Jews. And then he finds out that the one guy who's making a mockery of him, refusing to bow, is a Jew. Boom! That did it. And he says, that's it. I'm going to kill all the Jews. You say, how is second in command going to do this? Well, he obviously needs the go-ahead of his boss, Xerxes. Haman appears before the king, and this is what he says. It's found in verse 8. Haman says, there is a certain people dispersed among the provinces who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different, and they do not obey the king's law. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. Wow. He's really making the Jews out to be a peculiar and dangerous sect. He doesn't mention Jews by name, but it wasn't necessary. He knows that this king will trust him as the number 2 guy to do what's right. He continues in verse 9. Haman says, if it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will give 10,000 talents of silver. Well, what Haman is saying is, I know that with every mission, every assignment that this king commands, there's a price tag. Well, Haman's saying, I think this is so important, I'm willing to pay the price tag. King, don't let money factor in on your decision. I'll cover it. Verse 10, the king took his signet ring and gave it to Haman. Keep the money, the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please. Friends, the signet ring was a ring carved with his official symbol. It was like his signature. And so to give the signet ring was to lend his signature to whatever decree Haman thought best concerning this people. And look what it says in verse 13. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews on the 13th day of the 12th month. Friends, a holocaust is put into law that on the 13th day of the 12th month, all Jews everywhere are to be executed. This is not going well. Look at verse 1 of chapter 4. When Mordecai learned about all that had been done, he tore his clothes and went out crying with a loud and bitter wail. Do you feel the anguish of Mordecai? Here he stood up to do what's right, to take a stand for God. And, he was probably thinking of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It actually went well for them. When they stood up, yes, they were thrown into the fiery furnace, but immediately the Lord providentially came to their aid. They were rescued. They were promoted. They got a higher place in Nebuchadnezzar's cabinet as a result of this courageous obedience. I'm betting that Mordecai was counting on providence. Remember, providence is the message, the lesson of the book of Esther, that although God cannot be seen, he is working behind the scenes to bring about good, remember? And so I'm sure Mordecai was like, I'm going to take the stand, and I'm going to see how God saves the day and brings about all this good. Just the opposite takes place. Suddenly, Mordecai finds himself personally responsible for the ensuing extermination of all of God's people. What a nightmare. Can imagine Mordecai going, Lord, what happened with the rescue? What happened with the promotion? This is not how it's supposed to be. Well, recalling this reflection on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, maybe Mordecai overlooked this very important verse. Back in Daniel chapter 3, verses 17 and 18, here's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego actually said when they were threatened with being thrown into the furnace. They said, if we are thrown into the furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. Your Majesty, he will save us. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you that we will never bow to worship your gold statue. Isn't that a fascinating phrase? Even if he doesn't. We know he's able. We think he will. But even if he doesn't, even if providence is not to play in a way that brings about rescue and promotion, we have still resolved we will not compromise. Friends, I suppose that's one of the greatest expressions of commitment to the Lord, is a willingness to risk it all, even if providence doesn't save the day. It was important for Mordecai to be willing to sacrifice himself. If God swept in and saved everything, but even if God in his infinite wisdom and strategic decision decides not to. Providence, that's what we've been studying in this series. But it's important to know that providence does not mean everything always turns out good. Even though God is working in providence in this world, he often allows even heroic obedience to be met with great sacrifice and at times suffering. Friends, I wonder if you're that committed. I wonder if you're willing to obey the Lord, to live a life of devotion to him, even if it means loss for you. There are some Christian teachers that kind of spin the whole decision to follow Jesus to be, hey, if you follow Jesus, you'll be healthy, wealthy, successful, prosperous in every way. That was not the message Jesus came to deliver. Yes, God honors those who honor him. But sometimes that honor is postponed till heaven. Sometimes in this life, great hardship can arise specifically because of our decisions to take a stand for the Lord. That was the case in Mordecai. Here he had boldly refused to bow. And what are the consequences? He finds himself responsible for the demise of all of his people. What an example. What a reminder that full devotion to the Lord does not mean an easy, comfortable, smooth, successful life. The Lord will decide how it all works out. You know, I've been reading a book that reminds me of this kind of commitment. Forgive the state of the book. Do you know what happens to a book when you fall asleep reading it in the bathtub? Yeah. That was probably more information than you cared to get. But anyways, the book is called The Insanity of God by Nik Ripken. And I just find myself relating to this guy quite a bit. He's my age, pastor, but here's how his story progresses. He grew up on a farm in Kentucky and loved animals and aspired to be a veterinarian. That's all he wanted. And sure enough, as he graduated from high school, he had a huge scholarship to the University of Kentucky to become a veterinarian. But that summer, before he went off to college, he was working at a craft factory in town. And as he was at work in that factory, he prayed and he talked with the Lord and he grew in Christ. And in that factory, he started that summer to feel a call into ministry. Now, in Nick's case, he goes, I was being asked this question. God said, will you live for me? I don't mean to say that everybody who commits to live for the Lord goes into pastoral ministry, but that's what it looked like for Nick. And he decided that summer, I will live for you, Lord. And he abandoned his aspirations to be a veterinarian. He took a pass on this great scholarship, and instead of going to the University of Kentucky, he went to a small Bible school in the area to prepare for pastoral ministry. He then took a church in Kentucky and loved being a pastor, as I can so relate. And yet, after a few years of being a pastor, he felt God stirring his heart again, asking him this question. At first, he had been asked, are you willing to live for me? Now he felt God saying, are you willing to sacrifice for me? He felt a calling to the mission field, specifically to Malawi, which is this small country in Southeast Africa, one of the poorest countries in all of the world. And he was called to go there among the tribal people in the mountains and live without all of the amenities of modern life. And he, his wife, and his children answered that call and said, yes, we will sacrifice all of the easy life and move into the bush for you, Lord. Wow, what a beautiful commitment. I will live for you. I will sacrifice for you. And then God actually asked him, would you be willing to die for me? In the case of Nik Ripken, as he met with the Lord in daily prayer and Bible study, a little dangerous to meet with the Lord in prayer and Bible study, huh? Because it was in that context that he felt God say, would you go to Somalia? Somalia is this country in the Horn of Africa. It's an Islamic state where Christianity is illegal, where people who are converted to the Christian faith are officially executed and killed for that decision. And yet Nick felt this undeniable call. And so he moved his family to the border of Somalia. They were living outside of Somalia. And he would go a month at a time into Somalia to minister in this hostile context where his life, his survival was in danger. Man, I read about what it meant to be devoted to the Lord for Nick, and I am just so moved. I've been asking myself the question, Jeff, are you a chicken? Are you devoted to Christ, the one who died to save your soul, partially? Or are you so committed that you are willing to live for him, sacrifice for him, die for him, if that's what he asked? Well, in Nick's case, at least so far, he's doing well, continuing to serve the Lord, and has not been asked to give his life as of yet. But this example has just caused me to wrestle, this decision of, will I stand for the Lord? Like with Mordecai, with everybody else bowing in compromise, am I so in love with my Savior that I'm willing to live a life where I refuse to be half-hearted, but I want to be fully committed? So far, the Lord is not calling me to Africa or even Somalia. But just because I'm not called, and maybe you're not called in those ways, do you want to live a Christian life that's devoid of that type of commitment? Is it possible to be fully committed, as committed as Nick Ripken, as committed as Mordecai, where your very life is at risk? Is it possible to have that attitude in the Chicago suburbs? I think so. I think there's a way to say, Lord, my life is so yours. My money is so yours. My time is yours. My energies are devoted to your cause, not mine. My passion, my focus, my identity, it's wrapped up in you, Lord, not me. I'm increasingly desiring my suburban life not to be marked by compromise, but to be marked by an attitude of radical, wholehearted devotion, that the Lord, who sees to the core of who I am, would recognize that I am so in love with him and so marked by his sacrifice for me that I burn with a wholehearted desire to live a life of radical commitment to him, even though it may not look like it did for Mordecai or for Nick Ripken. Friends, it's a challenge. You're a Christian, maybe. If not, I pray you'd become one soon. But you have a question. What type of a Christian will I be? Yeah, Lord, I want a little Christianity in my life. Yeah, Lord, I'm willing to make a token commitment to the cause. Or do you look in the eyes of the one who died to save your soul and say, I'm holding nothing back. Jesus, I'm all yours. Let's pray. Lord, I pray for me, and I pray for my friends, and I beg you, dear God, don't let us get lulled into a place of spiritual compromise. Would you give us a fire, a love for you that burns so brightly that we look each day to live totally and only for you? God, would you raise the passion in our hearts to a place of fiery devotion that brings a smile to your face. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.